Good afternoon, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me now. Good afternoon. Welcome, attendees. Thank you so much for making time this Monday afternoon for joining us. Today's topic is the online disinhibition, and my name is Tracey Hopton. I'm so excited about today's session, so thank you so much for availing yourselves. Without further ado, let me start sharing my screen and let's get this party started. Excellent. As I mentioned, today is the phase 2 in our webinar series, and today's topic is the online disinhibition effect. Just a little bit about myself. I'm currently an educator at Norman Henshaw High School. I teach the most important subject, life orientation. I'm also part of the senior management team, and I'm serving currently as the grade 11 head. For those of you out there that are grade heads, HOD, educators, I welcome you here today. I'm sure we could share a lot of stories over a cup of tea or coffee. But today I hope it's really going to inspire you to engage with your learners, educate them, and bring about some positive change to your communities and schools. I obviously believe in lifelong learning. That's why I'm involved in this cyber conversation, and I hope to partner with you moving forward beyond this afternoon. As a brief description about today's seminar is really to just introduce educators to the impact of emerging technology. Human psychology is very much at the forefront of why we do things and how we do them. And cyber psychology more and more is impacting on our behaviors. And we want to discuss that in a bit of detail today. So understanding the disassociation associated with the high degree in engagement online is impacting the way that people are engaging online in a negative way, unfortunately. So these behaviors, such as online social behaviors or sexual education and the behaviors that go hand in hand with that, we're going to discuss, and the impact of hopefully making positive self-image and representations online for our learners and even for ourselves. The outcomes are great, but I've tried to summarize them down for us this afternoon just so we have some direction. We're going to evaluate an understanding of the emerging technology of human behavior. We're going to look specifically at the disinhibition effect. We're going to learn what feeds that negative online behavior and what we can do to hopefully try and manage our learners, ourselves better online. Guiding this conversation, you have a guest speaker today, Mr. Ismail Teladia. He's going to speak to us and address us on strategies in terms of sexual behavior, not just in the cyberspace, but behaviors in general, as well as at the end of the presentation, learning strategies to address self-representation. So I look forward to engaging with you. Please feel free to have the chat open throughout today's webinar. If you have any questions, post them there. And most importantly, please make sure to click on the link and register for today's session. The registration is available already in the link provided, and I just want to encourage you to sit back, and I hope that you enjoy today's engagement. Let's get right into it. I have the pleasure of welcoming and introducing Mr. Ismail Teladia, somebody that I share the passion with life orientation with. He is the current subject advisor in Metro South Education District, and he was appointed now as the Senior Curriculum Planner for Life Orientation. He is at the forefront of this subject. He's also activating online safety curriculum with Google and Google SA's partnership with the Western Cape Education Department. He's the Life Orientation Curriculum Advisor, so what he says, I do. And I feel really supported and lucky to have him in our corner in this subject. He is a man with many talents and has a passion for life. He's currently reading his PhD in education, and I know that he is at the forefront of promoting physical education in and outside of the classroom. So, Mr. Teladia, without further ado, over to you. Thank you so much for being a part of today's webinar, sir.
Thank you very much for that introduction, Tracey. I really appreciate the fact that you've focused on so much of that background. I think that is not so important as opposed to the topic that we are dealing with this afternoon. And so this afternoon, I want to chat to our teachers about exactly that issue of this disinhibition when it comes to the use of social media. And I want to introduce today's program with a short video. Okay, it seems as if we have a little challenge. Let me just start that one again. And we went through all of this a little earlier, and so let me just go there. Okay.
What's good, South Africa? This is In a Minute from the SouthAfrican.com. We've received a very grim confirmation that Lufuno, the 15-year-old girl at the center of a disturbing viral video, took her own life Monday evening, just hours after a clip of her being bullied in a Limpopo schoolyard was shared online. This very upsetting case first piqued the attention of provincial education officers on Tuesday. A swift investigation concluded that the bullying was a factor of her decision to kill herself. The heartlessly tortured teen reportedly locked herself away in her room and took a large quantity of prescription medication, purposely overdosing on the unspecified tablets. Lufuno was rushed to the hospital, but unfortunately, the medics pronounced her dead on arrival. This is a very tragic story, shedding light to stop bullying in our schools here in South Africa. Share this video to spread the awareness of bullying around Mzansi and make these learning environments just a little bit better for our children. If you know anyone who's being bullied or is a bully, please report it to the respective authorities.
Okay, so I think it's important just to give that kind of background after we saw what transpired last week with regard to this young lady. And so the issues around what our learners do with regards to online safety, and what was more disturbing to me, having watched that particular clip and the aftermath of that, was the fact that there were so many learners with cell phones. And so the learners were recording this particular incident, and although the incident is horrendous, the focus must be on those other learners. And so what I'm going to be doing shortly is, as we go into my other presentation, is just to bring us back to that particular incident, and so this afternoon it is about the cause of that particular bullying that transpired at that school. And one of the issues that we are looking at is the issue of using the platform that learners have in order to begin to either use that as a means of talking to learners in a way that they want to embarrass or humiliate an individual, and they do that online. And so when we're talking about disinhibition, effect of what learners do and what we as adults do in this particular space, we're talking about disconnecting between our feelings and what we post on social media. So this becomes a very important topic for all of us when we're looking at these particular issues. So I haven't established exactly what the cause was of that bullying process, but it could easily be one of somebody having done something on social media, and that having spilled over into the school environment. Because I had that same experience at the high school that I taught at. On a Monday morning, a girl came walking into the school, went straight across to a group of girls that were standing, and the one girl slapped the other girl, and it was over something that had been SMS'd over the weekend about a boyfriend. And so we see that being done where people ridicule one another and abuse one another on social media, and that creates the issue of that disinhibition. So towards the end of 2019, there was this hysteria in the Western Cape and nationally around comprehensive sexuality education and what was happening with what is being taught in our schools. And all of this transpired on a couple of clips that was shown on social media. And I want to share one or two of those clips with you. And this is one of those clips. We need to stand up. This is a book for grade 4 pupils next year. And so this was shared on WhatsApp, it was shared on social media, and we had mass hysteria in our communities, in our church groupings around the issue of social media and what sexuality education we were going to be teaching in life orientation. And so whilst we're talking about comprehensive sexuality education, the community were looking at sex education. So there's quite a difference between the two. In fact, we don't talk around sex education as such, but we always make reference to comprehensive sexuality education. But this particular clip was posted on social media and it went viral, and the backlash of that was having to meet with a whole host of community organizations in order to set the record straight. So that was one of the clips. This was the second clip that was also shown on social media. And the sad part of this particular situation was that these clips were taken from a book that was written by a gentleman called Peter Hom Knudsen in 1975. And the title of that book was How a Baby is Made. And so even though this book is not published in South Africa, somebody had picked up and taken photographs of the contents of this book and said this is what is going to happen within life orientation. And so how do we connect this to this disinhibition that we are making reference to? The most important thing that we're talking about here is that our social media becomes the gateway to sexual activity. And as adults, you may look and think about some of the messages that you send to colleagues. It may be very innocently a message sent, and you add a little emoji to that, and you don't know how the person on the other side is going to react to that. In the same way as people will begin to make advances to another person, and because they cut off the emotion of what they put on social media, and using the cell phone or using an email, they will then send a message which either is accepted by the person at the other end, or the person may reject the advance. But you can also very easily, after having sent the first text message, see what the reaction of the other person is. And so this becomes very important in terms of understanding sort of part of the disinhibition of how people use social media for their benefit, but also what it causes to individuals at the other end of the messaging that is passed through this particular platform. So I'm making the statement really clearly that in our current environment, that social media and our online activity becomes the gateway for sexual activity. And so our learners have become very good at being able to engage on this particular platform, but so have our adults, our officials, our teachers are quite good at sending some of the images. And I don't want to go into some of the things that we have already seen on social media, where teachers are engaged, where officials are engaged. And so we want to steer clear of that, because that brings in the negativity. However, we need to be aware of what it is that we post on social media, because it could lead to activities that either the individual wants to get involved in, or it creates a situation where somebody feels that they are being harassed. And so we must understand how powerful this particular platform is when we're dealing with people's emotions, when we tap into people's emotion. So there is a term called sexting, and this particular term is what is being used quite widely by both learners and adults in terms of understanding the impact or the message that they want to get across to the other party. So what we have found very clearly in terms of looking at the social media platform and in my engagement with Google, we have managed to do, and Google has done the survey internationally, and that is the kind of feedback that we have seen from the engagement Google and the surveys that they have done on their platforms. So one of the, if we look at the one in the middle, it speaks to 56% exposure to cyber risks, and that is our learners. And I'm not confining that only to learners, but I'm almost saying to some extent to our teachers. And then 10% having met online strangers in the real life. And I think this is extremely important for us to note, because that is part of the prevention that we are engaging in terms of human trafficking. And so when we're talking about human trafficking, it's not something that we see in the movies only. Colleagues, it is happening right on our doorstep. And so when somebody is taken away, for example, we saw the fire yesterday at UCT and students being evacuated from the hostels and having been moved to particular places. There was a message that came through on social media saying, please be careful, because this is also an opportunity for people to engage in human trafficking, where students could be housed in a particular new environment that has not been, because of the crisis situation, that has not been completely vetted. And so immediately there was something on social media whilst we thinking about the evacuation of students, somebody is already posting, watch out, human trafficking could occur. So we have to be so careful about what it is that is transpiring on the social media platforms for us to know when is it real in terms of what the individuals want, and on the other side, where people post things but they are disengaged with what they are posting, there's no emotion attached to it. It's a means to an end for a number of individuals, and we have to be sort of very careful around that. And so when I bring this back to life orientation and comprehensive sexuality education, it is just about having an understanding of what's happening. We can teach whatever we want in the classroom around comprehensive sexuality education, and it becomes important for our teachers to be aware of that. But we must also realize that learners have smartphones. And so what we're teaching in the classroom, that learner either has done some investigation for him or herself, because you can Google anything. You can go on to any media platform and get information. So whilst we are talking about following particular protocols, a learner could very easily go onto Google and say how to, and we leave the rest of it to the imagination in terms of responding to that particular question. So we have engaged with Google in terms of establishing the online safety guideline. And I'm happy to say that Tracey was very much part of that team in terms of looking at the online safety curriculum and how we can mediate that with our learners. And so we took that particular process and we put together a guideline for our learners. And I think it's very important, and we will share the link with you during this particular webinar. And that is to find out where our learners are in this particular space. And we started with the grade 8s, and we're saying to our grade 8 learners, because they are the younger group, how to be safe, okay? Learning about personal privacy and safety online. This is a stepping stone for our learners, and therefore we need to get them to understand what they're getting themselves into when they're going into the online space. With the grade 9s, because of the cohort change, the mindset change of our grade 9s, the emotional changes, the bodily changes that are taking place, it is about learning about communicating digitally and being respectful. And I think the operative word here is being respectful online. And so we need to ensure that our learners have that particular understanding. When we get to our grade 10s, now we're beginning into that semi-adult stage. And so it's learning about what is happening online. And I think we begin to expose them to the various platforms so that they are able to understand what they can get and where they need to go if they needed whatever information they require in terms of doing academic research. And I want to emphasize the issue on academic research, because I'm sure they are researching quite a number of other items in that space. Our grade 11s, we're looking at being responsible. Now we're moving closer to our young adults. And so it is about understanding what you can do with social media and how it can enhance you as an individual, how you can develop as an individual, and also then beginning to look at what you do post-school. And so for the grade 12s, we focused on being future ready, and that is using the social media platform to understand what it is that you do. And in this regard, we in life orientation have punted two very important phrases. The one is, we're talking about your digital tattoo, okay? Meaning that whatever you post on social media, it is there to stay, that you would not be able to easily erase it unless you have all the tools at your disposal to take something off out of cyberspace. So we make reference to a digital tattoo. And the second most important point that we add to that is social media, your new CV, okay? And I'm sure all of you, when you've made applications or you've been looking around social media and you're on various media platforms, social media platforms, you will find that people go onto your platform. They will go and check out. If you're in LinkedIn, then a prospective employer or prospective school will go onto your LinkedIn account and check exactly who this particular individual is. Somebody will try and get into your Facebook account and check what you're doing on Facebook. And so they will go and check on all your other accounts and see what it is that is happening, what are you posting, who are you linking with. And so those two very important phrases is what we promoting within life orientation for people to understand that the disinhibition that we are making reference to must be looked at in terms of saying whatever you're posting has consequences. Whatever you're putting out there, you cannot dissociate yourself from that. You have to take responsible for anything that you post on there, because you are going to go into a possible professional environment and people are going to look at who you are and what it is that you are connected to. In the same vein, we are saying to our learners and our officials and our teachers, your digital tattoo, that tattoo is here to stay unless you get it surgically removed. Well, if we're talking about being online, then you probably need some technical surgeon to be able to remove anything that you post in that particular space. So be aware of that and carry those things through into your classroom when you're engaging with your learners on these very, very important topics, because it will help them to understand the significance of being on social media, but also to be responsible for using that. Then very importantly, just on the issue of sexuality education, we do not talk about sex education, but we're making reference to comprehensive sexuality education. So we do provide learners in the online curriculum guideline with links where they can get information on comprehensive sexuality education, as opposed to the issue, the sex education is not something that we don't deal with. So that basically covers the topic that I had for this afternoon, in terms of trying to find ourselves in a space where we don't become disassociated from the things that we put on social media. We must be aware that everything that we put online has consequences. If it is to inform people about an event or an activity, then that has particular consequences because you want people to react. If you're putting something to an individual and you add particular emojis to it, you must realize that there are implications for doing that, that the person is either going to react positively or the person is going to react negatively. We cannot just post things because we admire somebody, post something or send the person an emoji and not expect a backlash, a possible backlash from the individual. So that becomes very important, that whatever we put on social media, we need to take a responsibility for. And so we cannot just dissociate ourselves from what it is that we post. Even if we are upset, and one of the things that we always say to persons before you press the send button is just sit back and just be mindful before you send things off. Just sit back, process it, think before you press the send button, because sending that particular message has consequences. And I think that is what we want to try and bring across to both our teachers and our learners, is the use of social media in a responsible manner, and try and take away the disconnect between what you say, even though it's digital, what you say and the emotion that goes with that, not only to yourself as an individual, but also the person at the other end of the post or the message that you are sending across to them. So Tracey, that's all that I'm going to be chatting to our participants this afternoon, and we will engage further in the presentation later.
Mr. Teladia, thank you so much. Your insights are always just so valued. So much of what you were saying, I was nodding along as you were speaking. And you touching on human trafficking and sexting and our digital tattoo just is so vital. Those topics in themselves are adolescents, let alone connected to disinhibition. So thank you so much. And there is Q&A to follow. So attendees, colleagues, all of us that are here today, please feel free to get onto our chat group. Any questions, any comments you'd like to make, and don't forget to click on the register and ensure that you are registered for today's session. I'm going to move forward and share my screen once again. I am really looking forward to getting into the topic in some great detail. So without further ado. Oh, I love it when technology just slows us down ever so slightly. Please bear with me as I share my screen. There we go. So ladies and gentlemen, let's look at what online disinhibition effect actually is. It's when people behave differently online than they would in real life. And what's already been discussed this afternoon makes us focus on the negative side of that. But let's take a step back and focus on the positive engagement that disinhibition can provide. We can be extremely generous and kind to others in a virtual world. For example, donating to causes like GoFundMe, or being a character of support to those in an anonymous way online. Liking a comment, reposting, sharing, tweeting about an issue that resonates with you can bring great attention to topics that need attention, that need support. Often individuals with low self-esteem are more comfortable in this space, and their online interactions are better than perhaps a face-to-face interaction because they feel more positive. It enhances their self-esteem and encourages them to engage in a way where they feel self-confident because of what they're discussing. It can combat loneliness. It can be a substitute for feeling negative or depressed online. So these social interactions can be positive. However, moderating negative moods through online social interactions is where we find ourselves. And often disinhibition can become really ugly. This is when the disinhibition presents itself in rude language, or harsh criticism, anger, hatred, tweeting from a place where you're really negative. Toxic disinhibition is also caused through virtual spaces where people post or explore online sites, things we wouldn't feel comfortable our learners engaging in. As parents, things we wouldn't feel comfortable with our children clicking on or viewing. So disinhibition often follows when the user is usually engaged in a way that is unruly, unchecked, and there's a dissociation between behaviors that should or shouldn't happen online. So I'd like to encourage you now to whip out your device or click on the link. It is shared in our online space, and answer 2 questions I've posed for you, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to share the screen of that online support. It's through Mentimeter. The code is 2749943 if you are already a user of the app. Otherwise, you can just use the QR code and answer those 2 questions for me this afternoon. Thank you so much. I am going to switch over to those screens. For those of you that do not have access or can't use your device because you're viewing this webinar via your device, not to worry. But those of you that can, if you could just quickly hop on over and answer those 2 questions for me, it should take you no time at all. So the code again is 2749943. Let's have a look at how our responses are coming in. Thank you so much. We've got 5 people that have responded. Thank you so much. So the first question is, has technology had an impact on human behavior? And the next question is, how much time do people spend on social media in 2021? We've got 10 responses so far. I'm going to give you a little bit more time. For those of you that haven't been able to respond, just in your personal capacity, has technology had an impact on your behavior? Think about that for a second. And then lead that conversation a little bit wider. Has social media had an impact on the learners you teach or the colleagues you engage with in your personal life and also your professional life? The next question I posed our panel today of attendees is, how much time do people spend on social media in 2021? Do you believe it's 5 hours, 20 minutes, 2 hours, 24 minutes, 1 hour, 37, or 3 hours and 45 minutes? How much time do you think on average each day do we spend on social media? Thank you so much to those that have already responded. I appreciate it. So let's have a look at our first 26 respondents of the first question. Let's have a look at our results. So overwhelmingly, we've got yeses coming in from our 29 respondents saying, yes, it's had an impact. For those that have said no, there is no wrong or right answer. However, we need to be honest and say that technology is inevitable. There's no escaping it. It's part of our daily routines in life, not just in our professional lives, but our personal lives as well. And those of us that struggle with data or connectivity, or perhaps even have to hand our phone or our laptops in for repairs, might feel out of touch or not up to date as we would have before because of how much we rely on technology nowadays. Let's have a look at our second response. So 24 people have said 5 hours, 5 people have said 2 hours, 0 people say 1 hour, so everyone's being super honest, saying reality is we definitely spend more than 1 hour, and 7 people are saying 3 hours. Thank you so much to those that have responded. The honest answer is 2 hours and 24 minutes is the average time as of 2021 that we spend online. I'd like to look at that stats in a little bit more detail. To put things in perspective, let's take a look at some of the most impressive results and where we might be spending our time online. On average, it's 2 hours, 24 minutes, 50% of which is spent on a mobile device. So that's not a television, that's not a laptop or iPad or any type of Chrome device. It's our in our hand connection. 2 hours, 24 minutes is divided around Facebook, YouTube, Snapchat, Instagram, and Pinterest. Facebook gets the most average response from people spending most of their time in that app. YouTube follows next with 40 minutes. Snapchat has us 30 minutes engaged, 28 minutes on Instagram, and 14.2 minutes on Pinterest. Now, as we go through these statistics, I think the reality is if we were really honest about our engagement and what we were doing online, we would probably feel that we were spending a little bit more time than those stats actually provide. And what we see through, first of all, using this QR code is that in class, we can engage with our learners really easily. We can get them to check in with us. How was their weekend? What's happening? And Mentimeter gives us the support to have a quick check-in, just like we've done now. The concern is then when the learners remain with their device in hand during our lessons and what they're doing in that space. So recognizing the impact of emerging technologies is the name of the game, in the classroom and outside of it. In our own working world as professionals, we're encouraged to engage. Most of us in the last 2 years have been encouraged to be in WhatsApp groups for instant messaging because of COVID, but wider than the pandemic. So let us understand the psychology behind the action that we actually exhibit online. The cognitive interaction is really the focus of today's session, and our cyber psychology in this regard is vital for us to understand why people are doing what they are doing online, especially our learners. The far-reaching impact of their online behaviours is no longer just online, it's in real time too. So usage awareness is what I want to focus on to get the ball rolling in the conversation around how we can manage the awareness with our learners, with ourselves, and with the parents that we're needing to come on board with us to support the learners we're trying to bridge and educate. So social media accounts have become more personal. We can't ignore that. More and more what we do online, we want to share. Connectivity goes beyond just an update. It's a lot more detailed. It's a lot more explicit. And what we're sharing can at times be too personal. That pause, think before we click becomes necessary. Perpetrators, the people that are trying to take advantage or engage in criminal activity online, is no longer just hiding behind a computer screen. It's using what we have access to online and bringing it to the forefront of engaging in conversations that unfortunately bring up the terrible topics of human trafficking or sexting or online grooming. There are online tools that can help, but are our learners engaged with these tools? Are their security settings set where they need to be? And is knowledge really power in this regard? So developing an understanding of child's social aspects can greatly impact due to the insufficient amount of real life social encounters. This quote really has become ever more important thanks to COVID-19. Now more than ever, this is a real concern. The consideration of COVID-19 and the break in socializing has had a greater effect on our routine. The firm boundaries that might have existed of coming to school, going home, performing your duties, and being responsible for your daily routine has been turned on its head because a lot of us have been forced into an online space, having to connect to Google Classroom, Microsoft Teams. Right now, the seminar would normally, before the pandemic, have happened face-to-face, but instead here we are in an online space. What I'd like to do now is engage in a short clip, a video, and get some feedback afterwards, so feel free to use the chat.
It's not like that movie.
Excuse me. Just gotta say one thing. I think gay people are sick, and you guys should just kill yourselves. Just end your miserable existence.
She's so stupid. You're so stupid. You know that though, right? You know you're stupid. You are the weirdest f***ing kid in school. Why do you always mess with me? You know what? All of you Muslims need to go back to the hellholes you're from. Can you believe this? F***ing terrorist. What did you say? You heard what I said. That bitches like you should get over themselves. Go on a diet. I'm just waiting for milk. Can you please leave me alone? I'm traumatized to get a gym membership. I hate fat people. I think you should go. I think you should go. She upset me too. I think you should go. Everyone hates you. You should hate yourself too.
What are you doing? Why are you talking to her like that?
Because she deserves it.
No, she doesn't. Like, walk away right now.
Homosexuality is a disease. We're saving humanity by killing yourself.
Get out of here right now.
Yeah.
Take a walk.
This woman is dangerous. All Muslims are terrorists.
Yeah. I'm also a terrorist, just so you know. You're fine. That's really mean. Are you okay? Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Exactly the slogans of this video highlight what disinhibition is. The importance of having compassion before we click and being strong when we enter an online space. That video highlights exactly what disinhibition is and how online disinhibition can be incredibly toxic and increasing conflict in society. As we witnessed from those interactions, bystanders that weren't aware of what was happening came to the rescue of a lot of the victims. However, online, this is not necessarily the same case. And a lot of people are left to deal with this hate speech and horrific interactions without actually knowing how to cope or manage beyond the online space. So there's 6 influencing factors of online disinhibition we're going to unpack together today. First, we've got cyberbullying, then really the understanding of the enhanced courage to do things online that you might not necessarily have done, that lack of restraint or that ability to feel courageous and removed from any form of responsibility. Online hit and run we're going to discuss, and having a safe space to say everything without facing consequences, disapproval or feeling judged can be positive. But when online toxic disinhibition rears its ugly head, it becomes increasingly negative. The fact that online gives us a separation from real time and minimized authority become very dangerous tools as we unpack online disinhibition. So cyberbullying is obviously, by now we know, the willful and repeated harmful infliction through comments online in an online social media space. It often happens through dropping a message, leaving a comment. It's harassing, threatening, humiliating, or hassling someone online over and over again. It often goes unchecked, and it can be in the smallest form of starting a rumor or spreading fake news. Creating web pages, videos, and fake social media profiles make it fun for others to engage, but that fun actually is at the harmful interaction of another. There is somebody that is experiencing something negative from inappropriate photos posted, videos, or privacy settings not being managed, where private moments can get taken advantage of or manipulated and used against you. And disinhibition is the #1 way how cyberbullying is catching on like wildfire. We're going to look at some of the minimized authorities in detail. We're going to look at how this impacts a learner, a parent, or a colleague. And as we unpack these really 5 detailed experiences of online disinhibition, we start to recognize where we need to meet our learners in the classroom, how we need to engage, and what support we need to give for the social, psychological, and emotional damage that disinhibition is creating. So first things first is disassociated anonymity. This is the understanding that you don't know me, so I can do whatever I like. It can be understood that when one relies on the belief that their online actions are in no way related to their real identity, they elaborate in who they are. They create an online persona. They exaggerate certain things, and they create or crave a space for attention. It's the addiction to likes. It's the addiction to receiving messages online and getting online FaceTime with somebody. Whereas in real life, it could be, yes, I can speak to you at break, but then I need to go to class and I can't counsel you or support you. This disassociative anonymity also creates the space to create false narratives, untruthful comments, and spiral that conversation to gain attention. Invisibility, you can't see me, I'm not being seen, so no one can hold me accountable. Therefore, I can remove all responsibility of my actions. There are no consequences. I can do what I like, when I like. And the reality here is we actually have to pause and think, whose responsibility is to manage this? Is it the person that provided the device, the cell phone? Is it the parent? Is it the educator that's encouraged the learner to go online, to do research, to find out things for a project, to engage in a space where I need you to know this, go and seek it out? And maybe we might be sending our learners down a rabbit hole and finding out information we're actually not comfortable with them viewing, seeing, or having to cope with. So when we talk about invisibility, we must also manage, where are we sending our learner? What access are the parents giving their child? And as people in the district, are we actually responsible in meeting our learners where they are? Are we giving them the tools to better manage their online abilities? Next, we have a discussion around asynchronicity. This is, you can't see me, so I can do whatever I want. It's not current what I post. I posted it yesterday, so it doesn't matter. If I post something, maybe it's even when I have an online message, when I'm going to be out of office and I send an email setting, so whenever I get an email while I'm on holiday, boom, that message gets sent. What happens if I receive an email that's actually urgent, needs my attention? Where does my responsibility begin and end? How are we being accountable? How are the learners or our children held to an accountable standard? Post now, then see results later, or ignoring the results later, affects our online life as well as our offline life. And that's what we need to engage our learners with. That once you post something that's not separate from you, it doesn't have an expiry date. There is no see you later. It's actually, I'll see you when I see you. And if you posted it a year from now, I can hold you accountable to it today. There is no time warp. There is no separation from what you've done online and what you're going to do in the future. The solipsistic interjection, this always gets me. Solipsistic interjection is where it's all in my head. This can be a positive outcome. It's a phenomenon that occurs when I read a text. I get a message, and in my head, I'm reading that message. So when I get a message from my mom and she's saying, good luck, or how was your day? I read it in a supportive, encouraging way. But there can also be a negative side behind this. It's merging in our minds, often in an online space where we should be feeling compassion, but we can turn that into jealousy, hatred, anger. Reading a message in another person's voice can have both positive and negative outcomes. The voice that we hear inside our head often becomes that self-talk that we repeat to ourselves. And if it's positive, that's great. But if it's negative, that becomes really damaging. Often when we believe something to be true, it has a bigger weight than if it wasn't believed to be true. So if we post something and we see it as fact, if we read a post and we believe it to be true, that can have far-reaching implications. We believe that the person has our best interests at heart, hopefully, but a lot of our learners, especially young teens, can't associate with who they should trust, who they can trust, what's toxic, what's supportive, what is met with compassion, and what's really met with anger as a, I'm going to use this against you. So this interjection has really dangerous consequences if not checked. If we're not upskilling our learners and encouraging them to really understand what we're receiving in a message and how to manage that message, where should we be taking guidance from? What sites should we trust? In education, we can all think about sites where we would want our learners to be, where we would want them to be engaged, but we also know where they are going, because curiosity is real, especially in youth. Next, I want to discuss, it's just again that dissociative imagination. And this we see visually represented here, that our online persona of confidence is often great, whereas offline, when we're face to face, we could feel insecure, challenged. We might not be confident raising our hand or giving our opinion on a topic, and this can have an impact. So is online taking us over the line? And this is a big question I want to ask you today. Where is that line? Is it in the sand or is it in cement? Is it just a game? Or what's happening online, does it have implications? Does it have an impact? And these are questions we need to ask our learners. These are questions we need to ask ourselves. Are we engaging in a way that is safe and supportive and limited to or unlimited in how we associate our online presence with our offline preferences? People say and do things in cyberspace that they wouldn't ordinarily say and do in the face-to-face world. It's true to say that we loosen up, we feel more relaxed, there's less restraint, and we express ourselves more openly. If I see a post, often from the SPCA, about an animal that's had something terrible happen to them, I feel outraged. I feel angry, and often I click on that anger emoji and lend my voice to say this is unacceptable. But I've got to trust that what's been posted there is true. I've got to trust that what I'm reading is fact. I've got to trust that what I'm viewing is not there to actually get me riled up or angry. And these are the things we need to ask ourselves. These are what we need to engage our learners with. We need to ask and say, how much of this is actually true? What are you subscribing to, believing, understanding, unpacking, and taking on board? This is where the hidden curriculum comes in. And it's not just the life orientations teachers' responsibility to engage in these conversations. This opens up individuals to being taken advantage of. So if we don't discuss these things, we're letting ourselves or those around us being open to things like catfishing, where they're forming relationships online with people they believe to be a certain age or in a certain stage, when actually it's somebody totally different that's engaging with them for negative or inappropriate reasons. Let's not shy away from the fact that this is happening. We must own it, we must discuss it, we must manage ourselves in an online space so that we are safer, so that psychologically, physically, socially, and emotionally, we are better aware, and our cyberspace becomes a safe space. So managing online disinhibition is important. And this is the reason we've connected in this webinar today. It's to really pause before we post and encourage ourselves and others to do that. Don't send something in the heat of a moment. Don't send something that later on you would shudder to think it's connected to you. That digital tattoo that Mr. Teladia mentioned is very real, and we need to be mindful of the impact of that. Because if I posted something 20 years ago when I was younger, I'd be horrified for learners I teach now to perhaps come across it. And that's why when I was a 13-year-old, it's as relevant and as important as a 33-year-old, a 66-year-old, and further. We've got to be careful of online oversharing. Disinhibition is something we need to check. And if we overshare, we need to pause and manage ourselves to realize, why are we oversharing? It's something we need to ask our learners. What do they gain by posting that, by sharing that? If it's just attention, we need to model that and manage it in terms of positive attention, positive engagement, and not a cry wolf stereotype. We need to encourage them, just like we would to not pick the wrong friends or hang out with the wrong crowd, to do that online and offline. It's equally important. So the sites they visit, the apps that they're on, the questions they're posing, the comments they're allowing others to view mean something. We all need to consider our emotions and state whether something is appropriate or inappropriate. A virtual space posting something, the response that we get matters. Just like when we say something, we need to say, my apologies, that came across wrong. Or we start a statement by saying, with all due respect. We can have tone and body language and face-to-face with that. But online, that doesn't exist. And we need to manage that so we can understand how that could be interpreted, how that could rub somebody up the wrong way. Considering reactions to something is incredibly important. And we need to encourage our learners to think that what they are hoping to receive as a reaction is going to serve them long term. It's not going to be something negative that is shock factor relation. As an educator and as an individual, we need to think about our response and reaction online. We need to be appropriate in our posting. We need to normalize how we chat online and make sure that those conversations we're having online would be conversations we had in real time, face to face as well. So there are questions we can ask ourselves. Would I post that? Would I say it? Are my profiles private and why? If they're private for security reasons, that's great. But if they're private from your parents, there's a deeper conversation we need to have there. Why are certain things available and other things hidden? We also need to be mindful about prioritizing our posting time. If we're posting something at midnight when we should be sleeping, we need to ask ourselves and manage, why do we post it then? What are we hoping to achieve? if we're scrolling through sites, Instagram, Facebook, online, Twitter, if we're posting and scrolling through it at inappropriate times, engaging with others at those times is inappropriate. Commenting or writing in someone's private messenger long after you would feel comfortable picking up the phone and talking to them on the phone means that there's a pause we need to take, and we need to manage how we're actually controlling ourselves online. The last thing I always want to encourage everyone to do is Google themselves. Search yourself online. What pops up? How are you seen? How are you engaging? How are you virtually available? And if it's in a positive light, that's great. You should be manifesting that in real time too. And this is a conversation we need to engage our learners on. We need to be mindful that online and offline should match. They should marry and be one and the same. So as I've discussed cyberbullying earlier, we need to actually turn this conversation around. And this is really important in a school synthesis. Often cyberbullying or any form of bullying gets reported, hopefully. And then you become the witness of this bullying. Now it's important to transition not into a bystander mentality, but into somebody that's managing the space. So your actions have a huge impact in how the victim of bullying moves forward. The important question to ask yourself is, am I letting things go because I don't think I can do anything to help? Or as an educator, a parent, a colleague? Because cyberbullying can happen at any age or stage. Actually, what you do is super important. As somebody that the bullying's been reported to, how you manage beyond that point matters. So reporting online is vital. Blocking, but remembering to save screenshots, information, and then pass it on to who you want to take leadership in solving this crisis is vital. We shouldn't save the screenshots as a constant reminder. We should have them so that they are evidence. But once we've passed them on to an adult or somebody we trust, we delete that evidence so it no longer terrorizes us from our gallery or from an online space. Comforting the person that's been targeted by the bullying is important, but it's in a restorative measure then to move beyond to help the person that is the bully, because 9 times out of 10, they themselves are being bullied. Just like we would deal with it face-to-face, so we must deal with it online. Restorative measures are vital, understanding the social and emotional aspects to restore trust, self-esteem of the victim, but also the person that is being bullied or a bully is as important, so that the cycle can be broken, so that it is not a continuous psychological warfare. Yes, policy is important, but here our conversation is understanding the psychology behind why people do what they do. And in an online space, that's important. So punitive behavior won't actually bring about change. We need to be restorative. Having open conversations, not waiting for a crisis or bullying. And in a cyberspace, we need to be proactive in that regard. So cyber safety awareness is really not discouraging engagement. It's encouraging it, but in a way that the technology we're encouraging our students, ourselves, our peers, or our colleagues to use is one that is informed. So we are making sure that we are informed about the technology, the safety protocols, managing what we should or shouldn't do in an online space. What is appropriate, what is inappropriate is so important. Focusing on effective use of online activities is vital. It's not getting caught up in just being online for the sake of it and having a profile because everybody does, but it's using Facebook because you see a need for it, or having an Instagram profile because you feel it's vitally important and you don't want to be removed from the access to education or socializing, but it's managing that effective use. Plugging into trends, also really important, but not viewing viral content just because it's gone viral. It's picking and choosing the positives that viral context can provide. So right now, it's really important in our own context to bring awareness to the fire that's happening in Cape Town, but not just to show horrific video footage of really devastation, but also to bring awareness to say, please donate, please support, please be aware, please bring about positive change, not negative comments. Lending a hand to the viral context of the need for support for firefighters and those that have been displaced. Not because we want to be part of, oh, did you see that video? Oh, wow, I got a really good angle when I posted it. Not everyone's going to be on my page. That's not the need. And we've got to engage our learners in that regard. This will allow us to exploit the effective use of social media so that when there is a need to gather support for an outcome, a drive, a campaign, it's met with positive outcomes. So that demands of us to be the role model online in this cyberspace and empowering positive user-generated content, not negative generated content. We don't want horrific viral videos of bullying. We want viral videos of how to stop a bully, how to manage bullying, and how to disengage, because we don't want bullies to become influencers online. We want them to be online for the right reasons, not the wrong reasons. And that's really important. So the easiest way to do this is going to be through empathy. It's more than sympathy. It's the ability to understand the perspective of others and experiencing them. And I know this is difficult. Encouraging everybody to know what everybody's going through isn't necessarily possible, but it's encouraging everybody to engage in a way that I can understand where you're at and meet you there. So we might not have lived the experience. We might not have been bullied online. We might not be in all of these online profile places with social media like our learners or our children, but we can encourage them to understand that social media has an impact. Talking about it, saying that it can be overwhelming, it can bombard, and meeting them in that space of how can I help? What do you need? A critical question to always get this conversation started is saying, how would I feel if someone wrote that about me? Earlier in my presentation, how did that video trigger you? How did those comments sit? Watching it is quite shocking. Seeing people being treated that way is horrific. And now at the end of the video, we realize those were staged interactions. But that's not to say that those interactions don't actually happen. And there are effects in the real world very much that we would hope to manage better. And this is what we need to get our learners engaging in. This is what we need to shape the conversation. And this is where empathy plays a vital, vital role. As I pause, I just want you to think from the comfort of your own homes or your offices, how could we better support our learners? What's the #1 thing we could say to them? And I've got some big impact reminders from today's presentation. So firstly, it's to say online life is real life. There's no separation. There's no post it, but don't live it. That doesn't exist. How you are online should be how you are in real day-to-day routine and lived experiences. How you interact and how you react matters. So even if you weren't the one to post the original video, you posting it matters. And bringing attention to it is important to realize. Secondly, your digital footprint is vital. It should be something that's positive. The internet never forgets. So please be mindful that when we talk about these things, the engagement needs to be exactly that. We need to be engaging in a way that's positive. And in the classroom, we've got to bring our learners to this conversation. We've got to imagine them being tattooed with what they have posted online. We've got to talk to our learners and hear what made them do what they did online. It can be through, like I mentioned earlier, Mentimeter, posting comments or giving them access to discussing things in a way to say, why did you post that? What does it matter? Even engaging them in an anonymous way to say, what's something that's happened online that you've really struggled with? And creating a safe space to discuss their own digital footprints, not naming and shaming, but engaging them in a way that lets them unpack and understand what it means to live in an online space where there shouldn't be fear of victimization. There shouldn't be unhappy online users. There shouldn't be concerns when you open a comment or when you have a notification of a private message. You should be met with positive engagement. And if you're not, we've got to start scaffolding and frameworking these online spaces. Thirdly, TMI, too much information. And this is something we've got to drill home for ourselves and for those who are engaging in conversations about disinhibition. Too much information online is exactly that. It's too much. And sometimes we need to mute or manage what we share. I don't need to know what you had for breakfast, but I'm glad you had breakfast. I don't need to know that your weekend was amazing every weekend, so that makes me feel that what I get up to is diminished or less important or less valued. But when something great happens, please, by all means, share it. I want to engage you in that regard. I want you to feel supported. but it cannot be in a glamorized way that isn't true to life. You can't visit the waterfront in January and still be posting about that visit in January in July, because you took so many photos that you're photoshopping and changing them to make it come across that you're at the waterfront every weekend. That's something we should challenge. That's something that we should engage our learners on, to say, why are you doing that? What's making you feel the need to engage in that way? And lastly, like I previously mentioned, empathy. Empathy matters in an online space and a face-to-face space. And what I'd really like us to go to the classroom with, or go back to our learners and our colleagues with, is that understanding of empathy. It's remolding the conversation of disinhibition. It's not just to point out the negatives. It's not just to say what you've done online is terrible and how dare you not manage yourself better. But it's really to go into an online space and understand what's going on that's made you react and act in this way. We've got to harness the positives of the digital space, which has limitless opportunity. We shouldn't just be following viral trends because they are viral for shock factor. We shouldn't become part of the Kardashian effect to just watch to know. We should be seeing ourselves in an online space to say, if we were influencers, what influence and impact would we be making? Would it be positive? Would it be engaged in a way that is celebrated, managed in a positive way, and harnessing something that can be seen as great? And this is where I want to come full circle and really encourage you to think about your own personal digital tattoo. Are you the role model online that your learners and your colleagues deserve? Are your profiles and privacy settings managed? Are you recognizing the impact of cyberpsychology of disinhibition online? Are you engaging in a user awareness standpoint? And are you having this conversation not on a personal level, but on a professional level as well? I know that my presentation has been a lot and it's information overload for a lot of you, but I am hoping to engage in the chat. So I want to say a big thank you for joining this episode 3 today. Please make sure that you completed the register. That is so important. And then I'd also like to draw your attention to the brainchild behind all of this, the great, the amazing Hafiza Ismail. If it wasn't for her, cyber fix from the WCD really wouldn't be where it is today. So I want to pause and just pay homage and my respects to Hafiza. You've been amazing, not only to me, but my colleagues. And this cyber conversation and cyber fix online portal is your brainchild. And I just thank you for addressing these serious issues and how they have a major impact of our learners, our colleagues, and ourselves personally. I also would like to draw your attention, colleagues, to future webinars. Social media is inevitable, and that is something that I will be discussing on the 10th of May. Reimagining influences of cyber safety and education. Say what? A focus on responsibility in communication. Cyber psychology, empowering techno-social culture. And then lastly, we finish the series off with heroic content creation. I want to thank you so much for this opportunity. And now I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Zahir Hendricks, who's going to pose some questions to Mr. Teladia and myself, and just give us the opportunity to engage. If you have anything you'd like to bring to the fore, or any questions or a slide you might want me to go back to just have that space to engage. So thank you so much for your attention thus far. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Mr. and Mrs. Hopton. Awesome presentation, so much of which we can resonate with as educators, what we see in our school structures and at home as well. And for the first question, that's what I want my focus to be. Just it seems like a lot of these cyberbullying issues take place at home, and it is then brought into school, as Mr. Teladia alluded to in his presentation. And a lot of the focus has been on the learners, quite rightly so, but how do we empower and equip our parents at home, since most of the cyberbullying engagements occur at home? I'm going to direct that question to Mr. Teladia first, and then Mrs. Hopton, if you can feel free to comment afterward.
Thank you.
Thank you, Zahir, for that question. I think first and foremost that there is a support from Google in terms of the parent control, and it doesn't mean as you have with probably your DSTV where you're putting in parental control, but there are mechanisms in place where the learner, if the learner were to, or the parent were to be linked to the learner's cell phone, the parent would be able to find information, not necessarily in a way of searching, but things will pop up where the child is going onto a platform that the parent is not happy with, or the child has blocked a particular individual or a group that is engaging that learner, then the parent has some oversight in terms of being able to control who and what is happening as far as the information is concerned, who the child is speaking to, where platforms the child is going on, etc. So Google has made that available, and I'd like to encourage our teachers to share that with our parents, because some of our parents, I'm sure, are not aware of what they can do to support their children. And it's not a policing activity, but it's one of being aware of where your child is at. The same way you would know in terms of almost the Google Maps type of thing, where your child is. So where the cell phone is where your child is supposed to be. And that again is a security measure that parents can put in place to know what their children or where their children are at any particular point in time. There is such a lot of negativity within our communities that unfortunately as parents we have to resort to this type of support and this type of linkages, which well, I personally would love us to move away from, but in the current situation, it is very much needed.
Awesome, thank you. Thanks for that, Mr. Teladia. Mrs. Hopton, I'm sure that as a management member, you deal with a lot of or enough of these issues. Would you like to provide some comment?
Mr. Hendricks, thank you so much. I think this is such a pivotal point and something we need to really focus on. From a school perspective, the parents play a bigger role sometimes than educators. They're often the ones, like you rightly mentioned, that are dealing with the backlash in their home space and might not even be aware that their child is being bullied, challenged, or in any way feeling some type of negative way in an online space, because it's happening from a small device, often in their hand, in the comfort of their bedroom, hidden from parental control. So the first thing I'd always love to encourage parents to do is check in with their child. Monitor their online behaviors. I'm not saying they need to spy or, for example, in their online space, read their child's diary. That's not what I'm encouraging. But what I do think is vital is they need to carve out time to understand what their son or daughter is doing online. The responsibility has to come from the home because they're the ones that are manifesting the ability to have the device in the first place. Then at school, more and more, especially because of COVID, we're finding that people are engaging online and the repercussions, the ripple effects and the consequences are manifesting on campus at school. Because now they're faced with the person they've said something to or engaged online in a way that they perhaps have regrets about. And this can be of concern when they don't know how to cope or manage that backlash. And it can often turn really ugly very quickly. Now, the parents coming alongside their child and engaging in the conversation can bring about a supportive platform where the child doesn't fear victimization or fear some type of backlash, but rather sees it as a restorative opportunity, that the parents there to support just like the school. Yes, we need to address bullying. There's never going to be a grey area there, but how we address it, how we move forward is vital. And this can't happen without the parents' support. It is, however, alarming to me when a child comes to school and is engaged in sending inappropriate images, being online in an online space, in a chat or a video call in late hours when the parent believes the child to be sleeping. That needs to be managed, and the parent has a responsibility there. So sometimes the conversations can be difficult. The parents might need to have a seat and really take on board the truths of what their son or daughter is getting up to. But I think that's important rather now than down the line when actions meet the online encouragements, because that's when things can turn horrifically bad. And then we start seeing things like suicide or sexual grooming turning into sexual acts, teen pregnancy, STIs being spread, etc., etc. And the emotional scars of that are far-reaching, long beyond the years or stage where that actually might take place.
Sure, awesome. Thanks for your response. And then I do have one more question. And again, I'm going to put this out to both our presenters, Mr. Teladia and Mrs. Hopton. So you spoke about some of the pastoral measures that an educator would need to follow when bullying is reported, but just in terms of addressing the actual bullying, what are some of the responsibilities that an educator needs to have? Especially when bullying is reported to the educator as the first point of contact.
Well,
yeah,
I think the responsibility firstly is with the educator and the engagement with the learner. I think if the matter can be resolved at that particular level, then great, and we try before we get into a into a very authoritarian approach and get into the issues of implementing disciplinary action, that we engage with the learner, and perhaps there's some underlying issue that the learner has, and if the teacher is able to resolve it within that particular space, then great. And I think that is the first point of call, and hopefully a place of resolution. However, if the issue is a lot greater than that, then obviously there's the engagement to the next level where things become more official, where there's an engagement with the school management and there's engagement with the parent. And I think so that would be the next step in terms of understanding what it is that the learner is doing and the gravity of that particular engagement in terms of the level of bullying. I just want to say to you that we have done quite a bit of work within the WCED, and we've had engagements with our minister as well as with the standing committee on the issues of bullying and what are we doing with regards to bullying in our schools. And so this conversation is not only one confined to what has transpired in the past week, but it has been a discussion over the past 2 decades. Yet we're not being able to resolve the issue. And the fact that we now have the online platform to some extent has made it easier to cyberbully someone on an emotional perspective and not necessarily on a physical perspective. And therefore, we need to bring that understanding. And that is why today's session is so important, because that online bullying is a clear case of, a classic case of disinhibition, of disassociating yourself with what you are doing and the kind of statements that you are making. But not to forget the important point, and to say that's going to form part, if you're the bully, it's going to form part of your digital tattoo. And therefore, it's going to stay with you wherever you go. So we've done quite a bit of work in that regard, but it's an issue of values, and I think this is where the life orientation curriculum becomes critically important. That whether it is a face-to-face engagement or whether it is online engagement, whether it's with an individual or with a group, the teaching of values becomes very important. And so if we develop values within all our learners, in all our schools, then we're going to begin to make an impact on what transpires within our communities.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Mrs. Hopton.
Thank you so much. Mr. Teladia, I totally agree. And Mr. Hendricks, what I want to add to this is the importance of the level of confidentiality. I think often when there's bullying reported, there's a feeling that time's against us. We need to get ahead of this. We need to manage it. We need to protect the victim. And I agree with those sentiments, but I often think that our reaction is only when there is crisis. Cyberbullying is something that's very real. Even as adults, we might experience it, and we shouldn't wait for there to be an incident at school to address it. So the proactive approach is always going to be your #1 go-to source of support. And that pastoral care, yes, it's not limited only to, for example, the grade head or the homeroom teacher, but it needs to be a all hands on deck approach, that everybody's involved in looking for, hopefully, a positive outcome. I think on a micro level, what's vital when there is an incident of bullying, cyber or face-to-face bullying, that a thorough evidence check takes place. And it can happen from a confidential space where both the person that's the victim and the person that is said to be the bully are sitting down and given their safe space to talk, to say where they're at and what's happening. And often in those conversations, we find out the root of what's actually going on. And that's when, unfortunately, the truth gets brought to light that 9 times out of 10, like I mentioned, the person that is bullying is often a victim in some or other instance themselves. So the intervention must be swift. Yes, don't waste time, but don't be only solution focused. Be proactive in the approach of looking for ways to eradicate the bullying, but in a way that we try and preempt this ever happening again for the wider population of learners. I'm not suggesting that we now blast this happened and it's these people that are to blame or make an example of the individuals, but it's to say that this is real. Cyberbullying happens on every level of society. So ignoring it doesn't mean it's going to go away. Addressing it needs to be the solution. And I think that there is a hand-in-hand approach from a parent's side and the school side that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks so much. Look, you touched on a few important points there, in that you spoke about actually addressing the bully, and the fact that, you know, difficult conversations will need to be had, but obviously in a respectful manner. More than that, the approach needs to be restorative, because like you say, often the bully himself or herself is a victim of being bullied. Absolutely. And just as one can learn incorrect behavior, you can also unlearn it and learn correct behavior. So thanks so much for that. Another thing
if I may add, Mr. Hendricks, disinhibition for me is the crux of the matter here, that a lot of learners or teens, even adults, don't realize sometimes that what they are doing online can be perceived as disinhibition in a toxic way. That their interactions, reactions, and comments actually have long-lasting ripple effects. And that something perhaps in their value set or their household is not seen as incorrect or wrong, could be seen as incredibly offensive and disrespectful in another context. And online has blurred those lines between what is appropriate and inappropriate. And because so often we're doing things without tone and without, like learners would say face-to-face, oh, they gave me a dirty look. Online, that dirty look manifests in horrendous ways, in things that the person that's posting would see as, oh, this isn't a problem, that's how I felt in the moment. But that moment could pass and you feel a different way. But document it as your digital tattoo, what you said lives on forever. And so this bullying through disinhibition becomes palpable and becomes as if it's never going to go away. There's no expiry date, like I've mentioned.
Thanks so much. There's 2 things I do want to touch on very quickly. It's just, but before I get to that, I just want to take one of the questions from the attendees. So it says, hi, joined a bit late. Is there a process or contact to report cyberbullying? Mr. Teladia.
Yes, yes, there is. First and foremost, the idea is firstly to do it in-house and try and resolve the matter within the school environment. And as Tracey has said, we need to try and get the perpetrator and the victim in the same space and see whether we can resolve it there without going public on it. However, if the matter has gone, is going to go public and it needs to be taken to the next level, then you can engage with the department, you can send something to me directly for me to begin to get the process moving.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, just on that as well, obviously dealing with matters internally, policy development then becomes exceptionally important. Developing a sound policy that addresses all spheres of bullying, including cyberbullying, protects the child, it protects the teacher, and to a greater extent, it protects the school as well. On the note
Zahir,
of, yes.
Could I just comment on that, which you were just saying? We must try not to be reactionary, and so the education becomes an important part of this particular process, so that we begin to try and nip these items in the bud, as opposed to reacting to when the situations present themselves. So I think that kind of conversation needs to happen with learners, but also with teachers amongst themselves, because there are, chat groups, and some people use really pathetic language in that particular space when adults are engaging, and so that particular education needs to happen at both levels again, so that we begin to speak to the values, as opposed to confining ourselves always to policy. What do we do in this situation? What do we do in that? Let's begin to educate. Let's begin to get our users of this social media to do it in a responsible manner, and begin, as part of that education, look at what the consequences are, look at the negativity that is happening, look at how it can impact, a few lines can impact on somebody's life, and so we need to be clear about educating our learners in this process.
Absolutely, and look, it's an ongoing conversation. It's not just a once-off. Okay, let's have a cyberbullying week, awareness week. This is something that needs to be ongoing. I have a question from one of the attendees. Should all of the schools have a cyber usage policy, regardless of whether cell phones are allowed at school or not? Mrs. Hopton.
Thank you. I think this question is fantastic. For me, what I feel is important is policy is the backbone of any process. And the challenge when it comes to social media or policy about BYOD, bring your own device, is there's always going to be something that we couldn't put in paper. Otherwise, the policy would just get bigger and bigger and bigger. However, I don't think that every policy that we have accounts for every interaction or everything we could have to deal with due to online behaviours. So to answer the question in short, yes, there should be a policy. However, we shouldn't wait for that policy to come about all of a sudden now because we're aware of it. We should be proactive in gaining awareness around usage, because the policy is only there if there's an issue. And actually the issue exists even if it doesn't manifest at school necessarily. We need to take the responsibility on to educate our learners and our colleagues and staff around how they interact, react, and manage themselves online, with or without policy, if I can say.
Definitely. Thanks so much for your response. We are nearing the end of the session. Before I hand over to Mrs. Hopton to close, Mr. Teladia, any final comments from you?
Thank you, Zahir. Just as a final comment, I think it's this program and the webinar series is so important for engagement at a platform that is so important and it's affecting all of us. So I would encourage our schools and our teachers to begin to spread the word on this, link to the webinars that are coming up in the next couple of weeks, because we are going to be dealing with very important topics. Again, and I'm saying it affects all of us every day, every day.
Absolutely. And then before I hand over to Mrs. Hopton, just on what Mr. Teladia alluded to a little earlier, please, I'd like to encourage all the attendees. There were some awesome resources that were posted in the chat thread. Just follow the chat thread, some very good material, and then also the recordings of all the Cyber Effect webinar series. I've included a link there as well. Please visit that. There were 2 sessions that were hosted before this. Absolutely awesome. Mrs. Hopton, I'm going to hand over to you for some final comments and then closing.
Thank you so much. Everyone, I'd just like to thank you foremost for making yourselves available for this important conversation. I hope what we've shared today you will take forth, not only to the classroom, but even to your own homes to engage your loved ones with. And let's think before we post. There were some comments asking for the video around disinhibition, so I have posted the link to that YouTube video. It's there for you. But like it's been mentioned, this recording will be uploaded onto the Cyber Effects website. I can't thank you enough for your engagement, your conversation. I hope this has given you food for thought. Mr. Teladia, as always, you are a joy. I can't say enough wonderful things about you. Hafiza, you know how I feel about you. Thank you so much, and to the panel for your support today. You have been amazing. So I hope the rest of the week is wonderful. Safe travels if you are going anywhere from the 23rd of April until the 3rd of May. I know this year is throwing us many curveballs, but manage yourselves, manage your time, rest, feet up. Thank you, everybody, and have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.